Well, I've been around too long to say that there's never a chance of anything, but I would highly doubt it. One of the messages that Ben has sent back towards Philly is that it's not his job to fix his trade value. It's not his job to correct his trade value or raise his trade value. That is not something that is on the menu for him. And so with that out there, I don't think he's interested in coming in and trying to change the situation. And one thing that I think is interesting is that his contract is structured in a way that he's going to get half of his money by October 1st, $16.5 million of his $33 million comes before he has to worry about getting fined a single dime for 41 of his games. So he's going to have a war chest that he can just sit this out. Now, I agree that the Cavaliers and other teams that are really interested in trading for a guy with 4 years left on their contract would be interested. That's also why you've heard a team like Minnesota and even potentially a team like San Antonio. These are organizations that typically don't do well in free agency, and so the idea of getting a star player under 4-year contract is very attractive. But Ben's value is so low right now, and the expectations of Daryl Morey on a trade are so high, we just are not in a trade zone for any team at this moment.
Well, I keep hearing California, California, California. That's where Ben would love to be. Obviously, he's not in control of this. He doesn't have a no-trade clause, so the Sixers can do whatever they want. I'm going to throw a dark horse in there that I think really should make a run at Ben. And don't laugh. You ready for it?
Uh-oh.
Sacramento Kings.
Whoa!
There's this all-star or this Hall of Famer that's going in on Saturday named Chris Webber. When he got traded to Sacramento, they, rolled the dice, did something against the grain, tried something different. He did not want to be there, but he got there. He saw the young pieces. He saw the love when he got to town, and there's not many places that are going to love you more than Kings fans will, who are as thirsty as can be. And if I'm their people, man, it's time for the Kings to do something different. You got De'Aaron Fox. You got Halliburton. You got some young pieces in Buddy Hield to trade. Swing for the fences. Try. You're in that Pacific Division. You haven't been to the playoffs since 2006. Do it, man. Just say those two superstars in the backcourt are off limits. Everybody else, they have an opportunity where everybody is, mad at Morey and doesn't want to do it. Kings got to do something, man. Because I think if they continue to run in quicksand and stay in the same spot, then a guy like De'Aaron Fox, I'm worried for him that next season he's going to raise his hand and say, all right, Vivek, I've had enough, man. I tried. I've been here for 5 years, whatever. It's time for me to go. So I think it's time for the Sacramento Kings to make a move just like they did with Chris Webber about 2 decades ago.
Yeah, listen, they added Davion Mitchell, too, to that mix in the backcourt, so they could use someone in there. They're going to have to move somebody at least to get someone like Ben Simmons. So we'll figure it out. We'll see what's coming up on the Ben Simmons front over the next coming weeks. But coming up,
I like what Charles says a lot of the time, but didn't he demand a trade out of Philadelphia at one time in his career? This is really what Clutch Sports and Rich Paul do is they leverage the era that we're in, and the era that we're in enables star players to be able to force their way out of their situations basically whenever they want it. And if you're Ben Simmons, regardless of whether you have 1 year or 4 years left on your contract, and you watch Jimmy Butler force his way out of Minnesota a couple of years ago, you watch Anthony Davis force his way out of New Orleans, you watch James Harden force his way out of Houston, they all got what they wanted. I think all of them right now are pretty darn happy with the decisions. Why wouldn't you force your way out of Philadelphia? And if Rich Paul can get that done, why wouldn't you go to Rich Paul to get it done? Ask Anthony Davis, who 18 months after Rich Paul demanded a trade for him out of New Orleans, had a ring, a 5-year max contract, and a beautiful lifestyle. Tell Anthony Davis Rich Paul doesn't do a good job. I realize it doesn't make everybody happy, but Rich Paul is doing what he has been enabled to do by the current conditions in the league.
Man, I love Chuck, and I miss him, Brian. We haven't seen him in a long time. But Chuck, it's funny with a lot of these older players, they forget about the stuff they did. And Brian, you mentioned it. In '92, Chuck asked for a trade. He was unhappy about the Sixers not going to the playoffs, unhappy about his salary. And Jim Lyman, the former Sixers head coach, he was quoted as saying he didn't want to be here. That Sixers team didn't make the playoffs. Chuck got his trade. He went to Phoenix. And guess where he was? Like Anthony Davis was after he left New Orleans. He was in the finals with the Suns. So it all worked out for Charles. And look, Rich Paul isn't the first agent to force his agent into different circumstances, and he won't be the last. But this is a business, and so when a guy like Blake Griffin gets other star players get tossed around to places that they didn't expect to because they signed a contract, we don't cry about that, right? So, hey, man, it's I think we got to remember what we did in the past, too. With all due respect, Chuck.
Yeah, no question. Look, we all love Charles Barkley, and he might be watching right now, probably either at home or at some golf course, around the Phoenix, Arizona area. But here's the deal. When this trade was made, because he specifically talked about Anthony Davis, there were a lot of people, okay, including people on this show, who said, wow, the Lakers got fleeced. So which is it? Did the Lakers get fleeced? Or did they steal Anthony Davis? It can't be both. Now, I don't know where Charles landed on that particular commentary, but I know there were plenty of people with a lot of different takes when it came to that particular trade. And here's the other thing, okay? LeBron and Clutch and this group may have started the player empowerment movement for this particular generation, but they're not the only people. Brian, you mentioned it. Jimmy Butler forced his way out of Minnesota, eventually landed in Miami. He didn't want to stay in Philadelphia after moving out of Minnesota. We've got a number of guys. Look at the Golden State Warriors, right? Kevin Durant left Oklahoma City, joined the Warriors. Look at their team in Brooklyn. So it's not just LeBron James and Rich Paul doing this stuff, Brian.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the big thing is that really, if you can demarcate with two events in 2014. One, LeBron James moved to Cleveland, where he got there and basically said, Andrew Wiggins and those guys over there are getting traded for Kevin Love. And he put his team together blatantly. And Adam Silver took over for David Stern. Adam Silver has done a lot of positive for the league, but he has, during his tenure, has basically allowed the players to have more control. Unlike David Stern, who fought them at every turn, he has done it. And that really is the beginning of the player empowerment era, and it coincides with the growth of Clutch Sports, and I see no way that that's going to change anytime soon. And now, if you are a player who wants to alter his situation, you look at Clutch, and that's why Zach LaVine going with Clutch last week is a very interesting development as we look forward to the next 12 months in the NBA.
No question about it. And, look, David Falk had a lot of power when he was a super agent in the NBA. Rich Paul is that guy right now. Chuck, look, when I go to Arizona, we'll have a drink and we can talk about this. Brian and Mark can come too. All right, let's move on to some
Top golf.
Public criticism. No golf. I don't golf anyway. Let's move on to some public criticism of LeBron James from a former opponent. Rasheed Wallace was on the $1 Million Worth of Game podcast and criticized LeBron, said he wouldn't be able to thrive in Sheed's era. Here's the quote. He probably would have held his own, but I don't think he would be as successful as he is now. It's a whole different era back then. Now, Mark, I don't know about you, but I'm old enough to remember LeBron James going for 25 straight points against Rasheed Wallace and the Detroit Pistons. It wasn't that long ago, but are these comments fair or foul?
I think they're foul. I'm trying to figure out this era that he's talking about, but I don't care if it's George Mikan's era, Bill Russell's era, Dr. J's era, Bird and Magic Johnson's era, Michael Jordan's era. There's no era that LeBron James wouldn't be dominant in. And I'm sure Brian Windhorst was at this game. I might have been. I'm trying to remember. But, yeah, I mean, I'm trying to figure out what this era is. He talking about high school, what college? Like, what era is he talking about?
What do you think, B?
The number of drives that I made up to Auburn Hills in my career, I can't even tell you. I don't miss it. The Pistons really did a great job with LeBron early in his career, especially when they had Ben Wallace next to Rasheed Wallace. But here's the thing. Obviously, this is low-hanging fruit. You can smash Rasheed for saying LeBron thrived against him personally. But I just don't think it's true at all, because in a way, the changes to the game have made LeBron sort of have to change his game and become more of an outside player, become more of a shooter. Back in this era that Rasheed's talking about, when LeBron could just use brute force, he was great. In fact, I know people may not remember this, but LeBron actually won a scoring title. And it happened in the era of bully ball against teams like the Pistons. And I'll go back to the player empowerment era. If that's also what he's referring to, when, you didn't have, clusters of super teams, LeBron probably would have been even more dominant because he wouldn't have had superstar teammates to depend on. So I actually really like Rashid. I just don't think this comment holds water. And I think upon reflection, he'd have to agree with it too.
Go ahead, Spears.
Well, it's slow news day, huh? These guys are talking some crazy stuff, man. Hey, man, look, based on what we're saying, I averaged 30 in college, man. Everybody, forgets what they did, and it just oh, boy, man. NBA, God bless it. It's fantastic.
Oh, man. All right, let's get to the latest surrounding Ben Simmons and the Sixers. Keith Pompeo, the Philadelphia Inquirer, reports that people in Simmons' camp are not inclined to help the Sixers find a trade partner for him. So, given the public criticism from Doc Rivers after the playoffs and how his name was in the James Harden trade talks last season, Mark Stein of the New York Times reports that the Cavs are one team that's interested in him. So, Brian, is there a chance for Simmons to repair his relationship in Philly? And if not, where do you think he